Hello and welcome to another episode of my Productivity Mastery series. My name is Pullein, and this week I want to answer a question that I was asked in a webinar I did this week, which was, how do you manage emergencies? Now that's a really good question, because emergencies will inevitably happen. No matter how well organized you are, how well prepared you are, things inevitably will go wrong. That's just life, and there's not a great deal you can do about it. That said, there are a number of things that you can do that can prepare you for emergencies should they happen. Now, the first step, and this is crucial if you want to keep a modicum of control whenever emergency happens, is make sure you have your plan for the day written down. It's when you don't plan for the day and an emergency happens, that's when chaos arrives. It's designed that way. Smart people know that they need to have a plan for every single day, even weekends, although maybe your plan for the weekend is not as quite strictly laid out as a plan for when you're at work. But still, having a plan means you've got somewhere to go to get back on track after the emergency has gone away, or after you've dealt with the emergency. And that's a key point. Emergencies do not stick around forever. They disappear. I was talking in another webinar last night, and we were goal planning and talking about how to plan for the next decade. And when we look back on the 31st of December 2029, as we approach the 2030s, we will look back and we will hardly remember the spring and summer of 2020 when we had the COVID pandemic. We won't remember it. It's just going to be a distant memory. So right now we are in a global pandemic where our lives have been turned upside down. But that doesn't mean it's going to be that way forever. Sure, things are likely to change. The way we work is likely to change in the future. But that was inevitable anyway. The way we were working today was never going to be the same as what we're working in 10 years' time. So having some kind of plan for the day means that you're moving forward on your terms, not on somebody else's terms. So I know it's difficult to find 10 minutes at the end of the day. And I know that just sounds really weird. How can it be difficult to find 10 minutes at the end of the day? It's only 10 minutes just to decide what is your plan for tomorrow. What are your must-do tasks for tomorrow? What are your objectives for tomorrow? And really, you only need 2 objectives tomorrow. And remember, if you do 2 objectives every day for a week, that's 10 objectives. If nothing else, you've moved something forward. You've moved a goal forward or a project forward. So whatever happens, step number 1 is always have a plan, because then you can go back to the plan once you've dealt with the emergency. Step number 2 is, before you start panicking, before you start reacting to an emergency, first of all, ask yourself the question, am I the right person to deal with this emergency? Now, sometimes we feel obliged, just because of the position we are in, to deal with a specific emergency. But that might not necessarily be the case. And I remember when I was in sales, and there were often times where I had a husband and wife come in. They were really excited. They ordered their car, because I sold cars. They ordered their car. We filled out the order form. We filled out the lease agreement. And then on the Monday morning, we'd send the lease agreement off to the finance company. And that later that afternoon, the finance company comes back and says, I'm sorry, these people have bad credit and they didn't get the loan. I, as a salesperson, suddenly have dealt with that really uncomfortable position of having to call the client and saying, I'm afraid the finance company has declined you. Now, when I was back in my 20s, what I used to do was I used to take the responsibility on and say, look, I'll talk to the finance company, I'll do this, I'll do that. When really, at the end of the day, that wasn't my responsibility. It wasn't my fault that the client was not particularly good with their credit, and really it was their responsibility. Now, as a good salesperson, I did offer alternatives. I did find alternatives for them, but it wasn't for me to clear their credit rating. That's their job, and there's no point in me wasting time. But when I was in my 20s, I didn't understand that, and sure, I wasted hours trying to fix people's credit ratings when that was not my job. So the first thing to do is to resist the temptation to say, this is my responsibility. Sure, sometimes it really is your responsibility and you need to deal with it, but it is a question you need to ask yourself. Is this my responsibility, or is there a better person who could handle this better than me? And sure, often there really is another person who could deal with the matter a lot faster, a lot more efficiently, and a lot more effectively than you can. In that case, delegate the emergency to somebody else. So an emergency to you might not be an emergency to them. And that's a key thing to remember. So before you go into a blind panic and start saying, it's emergency, it's emergency, it's emergency, just stop, take a deep breath and say, am I the right person to deal with this? If so, deal with it. If not, delegate it. Another thing about emergencies is, for a lot of emergencies that do come up on a day-to-day basis, part of the thing that you can do is prepare for them. Now, last night I was doing a webinar, and although I live in South Korea where the internet is very, very stable, there are occasions, maybe once or twice every 2 or 3 years, where the internet will just go off. Now, in the middle of a webinar, if I'm an attendee, if I'm a participant, that's not too much of a deal. I can reboot the internet, get back online. But if you are the presenter, as I was last night, then the key is to make sure my internet is stable. Now, that's something that I don't have complete control over, but what I do have control over is having a backup. And sure enough, I made sure that I had a backup Wi-Fi supply. Actually, it was through the LTE on my phone, but I knew that I could connect to that within seconds and get back into presenting if something went wrong. And it's something I learned from when I was doing presentations many, many years ago, before we went into the current situation where most of our presentations are online. Then I was having to deal with live presentations in a room with maybe 40, 50, 60 people. In that case, I made sure I had backup cables. I had made sure I had my power cable with me. I had a checklist that I followed to make sure that I covered all possible eventualities in case an emergency did happen. And the same applies to the way we work today. We need to have backup plans in case something goes wrong. And a lot of emergencies are predictable. You can predict things going wrong. In which case, what you need to do is to make sure that you're trying to make sure you've got contingencies for those predictable emergencies that may come. Now, a lot of these emergencies may never happen, and a lot of emergencies may be like 1,000,000 to 1 shot that they're going to happen, in which case you can't plan for everything. But there are some, like Wi-Fi going off in the middle of doing a very important webinar, where you can mitigate that and you can start to prepare backup just in case. And it is something that you want to be aware of. It's that third part of handling emergencies, which is making sure that you're anticipating any possible emergency and making sure that you've got a backup plan that you can switch into incredibly fast if you need to do it. Well, hopefully that's helped you out there, because I know it's something that does occur. It's something we can't avoid. Emergencies are going to happen. Do you have a backup plan? Make sure you've got that backup plan. Before you start tackling an emergency, make sure you ask the question, am I the right person to deal with this emergency? And make sure you're giving yourself at least a shouting chance of getting back on track when you've dealt with the emergency. Emergencies don't stick around. They're quick. They happen fast, and you need to deal with them and then get back onto the plan that you made the night before. Remember, the planning is such a crucial part of maintaining your composure, keeping yourself low on stress, and making sure that you're not overwhelmed. Well, thank you very much for watching this episode, and it just remains for me now to wish you all a very, very productive week. Hello, thank you very much for watching my videos. Now, I have something exciting to tell you about. Recently I have developed a brand new time management system. It's a system designed to manage your time in the 21st century. The world has changed a lot over the last 20 years. In fact, it's actually changed a lot this year. And what we need now is a system, a time management system that is very easy to use, easy to maintain, so that you can spend more of your time doing the work. And that's what the time sector system is all about. It's going to change your whole belief system about the way a time management system should work, because this focuses on when you are going to do the task. And let's be honest, it doesn't matter how motivated, inspired, or how urgent something is. If you don't have time to do it, it is never going to get done. And that's what this system is built around, getting your work done, so you can spend more of your time doing the things that you want to do. I hope you join me in this course. The full details of the course are in the show notes below, so please join me, and thank you very much for watching this brief video.